Hello everyone, I'm back. This is Ray and on we go with another floral demonstration. This is my photograph that I am working from. I doctored it in my Sketch Club app on my iPad. Now I pre-wet the page with a large wash brush, but I only partially wet it. And you'll notice I'm directionally wetting it because I know I've got a flower in there somewhere, and I'm leaving that area reasonably dry. The other areas around the edges I'm going to be wetting in linear way as well as with the flat of the brush. Now I'm starting to flick my colours on, and I'm using quinacridone and coral and permanent rose together. Even a little bit of cadmium orange goes into that, and I'm using my dagger brush. Permanent magenta and permanent rose goes into the other side of the painting with a little bit of sap green and lemon yellow. Lemon yellow is going to be into the center of the flower, so I pop a bit of that in, and for continuity I dance that color through the greens. Now I'm still using my dagger, and I'm using it in a fairly linear way now, and dragging permanent rose and permanent magenta into it, gradually isolating the floral shape, which is the flower which is in the top right hand area. Now don't be afraid of using complementary colors one over the top of the other. I did with the green, sap green, and my permanent rose colors, and that worked quite well. Now I'm using permanent magenta, still in with my lovely dagger brush, and just on the flat of the brush as well as on the tip. I'm gradually just sculpting my flower. Establishing an area now where the center of the flower is going to be, and now I'm really getting into some darks already, and my page is still quite wet. I haven't let any of this dry. This is permanent magenta with the sap green mixed together. That's what makes that dark. So I'm popping the dark strategically around certain areas of the painting, and this is also helping to isolate my flower. Remember, my photograph had a lot of linear striations and movement going, and I really want this painting to have a lot of movement, a lot of excitement. Just bringing some little odd shapes. I'm working very intuitively. I'm not pre-drawing, as you notice. The painting is just evolving before your very eyes. And that's the excitement of painting like this, not having too much of a plan, but allowing the paint to do a lot of the work for you. Now I have dried the page first, and now I'm just putting in a little bit of an indication of the stamens for the flowers. This is helping to establish the center of that particular area. Just a hint at a petal, not too much. I don't want it to be too much of a botanical study, but I do want to just give myself a bit of a break so that I've got some idea of the structure of the flower. Now I'm popping in this permanent magenta and permanent rose together into the background. This is behind the flower, but I want to carry that color through. You notice I'm not covering up all the whites though, because they're going to help me later on, and you will see what happens when I start to work with those whites later in the painting. But right now all I'm trying to do is just establish a little bit of an area to give a break between the petals. What I just did then, I'm breaking the line up. That line was too strong, so I've just dabbed it with a tissue. Now areas in the background have to be established with negative painting, and I'm using quinacridone and coral and a little bit of cadmium orange, maybe a bit of permanent rose into it. And if I want it to be a little darker in places, I'll add permanent magenta. But my photograph had a lot of linear panels and areas behind it. You will see the photograph coming up very soon, so you get an idea of what I'm looking at to give me a guide. So gradually I just work my way through my painting to give some sort of similarity to my photograph. I don't get locked into being exactly like my photograph, but the way I worked on that photograph in Sketch Club was to give it a lot more movement. So I used my stylus to drag parts of the photograph to blur them. That's what made all those lovely marks in the photograph that I'm trying to indicate now with my watercolor. I did use the red colours then with the green. You see that they both merge together quite nicely. Don't be afraid to put two complementary colours together. They can still work and grey each other out, which makes it a lovely clean grey. So gradually I'm working my way through the shapes that I'm seeing in my photograph, not locked into it completely. Still working with those funny lines that were behind the flower and still creating as much movement as I can. So piece by piece, I start to gather my thoughts on the background. The photograph shows a lot of these very strong panels and blocks of colour and value, so I'm putting those in, even though they might look a bit disjointed now. I'm putting them in because that's what makes my photograph, to me, so exciting. I'm still aware of the whites, and I don't want to diminish them completely. Those are, as I've constantly said in all my videos, those whites are so important because they keep your painting clean and lively. And if you have what I call a pooey colour, which is like this greenish red mixture, which I don't think is pooey, but it is a grey. If you have a lot of those colours coming into your painting, then the white helps to clean them up. So keep those whites for as long as you can. It's probably going to look like a mad woman's breakfast to you as I'm putting all this paint on, because I've got the camera quite close to the painting. When we step back from it and see it later on, you'll see how it all starts to come together. Now this, for the most part, is negative painting. I'm working only in the background. I'm augmenting some of the marks that I've made by putting a dark near them. You see, like just then, or here and there, I'll put a little pop of dark, little hints of things. I want to create a mystery, and negative painting is ideal for doing that. See, all of those linear marks that I put on in the beginning of my painting, I can now start making more of a focus of those by doing some negative painting around them, just as I'm doing here. The trick is trying not to overpower all those whites. You have to be strategic, just how much you put in and how much you leave out. I'm very focused on putting the darks near the flower itself though, and that helps to focus the eye to that area, and the direction of my paint marks also go to that area. Now watch the way I'm using the brush here. This is creating movement as well, and I'm using my little round brush for this, my number 8 silver black velvet brush. But even just the direction of the way I'm doing some of these marks are creating movement. They're on a semicircular angle. So I'm creating movement all the time. Here I am just popping a little bit of that green mixture into the white areas. That keeps it clean. But here I'm actually glazing over the top of the red with the green. Now to make that poo, as I said before, is make that murky colour look cleaner, a dark goes right next to it and it's going to look a lot more sparkly. I just gave you a quick glimpse of the painting so far, and now I'm starting to remove just a little bit of linear marks with a thirsty brush, dabbing it with my tissue after I loosen the paint. Now this is my big wide brush. It's about a 2-inch wash brush, and I'm using a mixture of the quinacridone coral and permanent rose together. Maybe a little bit of cad orange as well. And all I'm doing is just tightening up now. I'm starting to focus the eye and get the eye to go back to where the flower is. So I'm getting rid of some of the whites by glazing, just glazing a little bit of color here and there. And here I'm chiseling out, if you will. I'm sculpting the edge of the flower, and I don't really know what that shape is that I've created here that I'm working on now, but I thought a little bit of negative painting on that, I can make a bud into it or something. We'll see what happens. Once again, those darks, negative painting, and they are in my photograph. They give me a little bit of a guide so I can work from that using my little number 8 round brush, and I'm just being quite careful about putting in the darks, little blocks of colour, not painting on the flower or what I may perceive as a bud, but I'm painting the background areas. Also, at this point, I want to remind you, don't make your corners too interesting. Keep your corners fairly plain and simple. If they've got too much interest going on, they'll create too much attention and your viewer will likely leave your painting. You want to keep that viewer interested in your painting. So now I'm just sculpting a little bit of the flower, back to negative painting here and there, and just allowing my paint to guide me. Scary stuff, but great fun. Just doing some little final touches here and there. Now, where that lime green was, I pointed to an area that I could also transfer some of that colour near the flower. It helps to keep the colour continuous. And again, with my thirsty brush, just taking out a little bit of some of these linear tendrils. I don't know what you would really call them. I still don't like that shape I put in here, so I'm reconstructing or deconstructing, if you will. And I don't know, it's looking a little like a tulip bulb, but we'll see what happens with it. I think it breaks up that mass a bit more. Negative painting around it to augment that shape. When you're doing your negative painting, especially in this area, I want it all to be continual as far as colour goes. So it's a mixture of my sap green and permanent magenta in degrees of value. But close up to the object, like a petal or one of those tendrils, I make it fairly dark. Sometimes I have to use a thirsty brush occasionally to take out some that I've put in. It's a matter of putting it in, taking it off, putting it in, taking it off, until you feel comfortable with it. I don't like the shape of that particular veil I put in before, so I softened it and then I glazed some red over the top of it. Getting to the end of my painting now and tightening up even more. Once again, don't make your corners too exciting. I'm just trying to augment some of those veils that I put in before. Popping in some darks. Once again, making more of my focus close to my flower. More of the interesting things. And a lot of people do not want to go to the dark side when they're using watercolor. I think you can see in a painting like this, it's so much more dramatic. Look at that. Putting on that dark, just being brave and doing it. Using your nice wide brush and letting the dark create another shape. And out of that shape, I'm using my finer brush and I'm dragging a few tendrils. And we've come to the end. So thanks for sticking with me. I hope you've enjoyed this one. I hope you will visit me again, and please subscribe to my channel and leave comments. I love to hear from you. Bye-bye for now.